All right, let's talk about Plato. But before we do, let's just briefly recall what have been or the context of a Platonic political theory. We have to understand that classical Greek political theory um, has been greatly influenced by the context of the polis. The polis are these independent city-states that serves as the political subdivisions of ancient Greece. Because in ancient Greece, it's not a state as what we know right now, but um, it is basically a group of fragmented city-states, and these city-states are independent from each other. They're called city-states because they are sovereign, they are independent, and they are free. They are not as big as a state. As a matter of fact, they're simply as big as a city, but they are as free as a state. They are sovereign as a state. So basically, that's the context of classical Greek political theory, and Plato is also heavily influenced by that. And there's this intense political life in ancient Greece, meaning to say, there's no separation between the social and the political. Everything that happens in the society, participation, and so on, they all have a political color. And so you will see that the context of Platonic political theory is this so-called political closeness within the context of the free, independent city-states in ancient Greece. Now, you also have to remember that Plato was also heavily influenced by none other than his great mentor, Socrates. If you look at Socrates, his moving away from the pre-Socratics basically signals the start of Western political theory. The pre-Socratics, they are more concerned with the universe. They want to talk about matter, they want to talk about elements, they want to talk about the cosmos, how it works, etc. And they believe that there is there are universal laws that governs the movements of everything in the universe. And these universal laws, which could be said as the pattern of patterns, the logos, they could be studied, scrutinized, and discovered by human reason. That's very, very, very important. As a matter of fact, that's what science is. When you look at science, you're basically studying the universe. Why can we study the universe? Because there are universal laws that governs everything that is happening in the universe. And the human intellect can study them, can analyze, can evaluate, can describe them, can learn them, can discover them. Okay? And that's a major breakthrough for classical Greek philosophy. Now, when Socrates came, what he inherited from the pre-Socratics is their conviction that there are knowable natural or universal laws out there that govern everything. The pre-Socratics are more concerned about these natural laws as they apply to matter, to the universe, to the cosmos. Socrates, on the other hand, is not really concerned about these universal laws that govern matter. But Socrates is more concerned with the universal laws that govern human morals, the rightness and wrongness of human actions. And here, Socrates will develop his notion of what a good life is. You see, for classical Greek philosophy, ethics is an integral part of everything that they've been looking for. Everything that they've been studying, ethics has always been an integral part of it. What's right? What is wrong? How can we know that it's right? How can we know that it's wrong? Where do we get these notions? That's what ethics is. And for Socrates, thinking about these things basically constitute the life of a philosopher. The life of a philosopher for Socrates is the good life. Remember one of the most famous sayings of Socrates: an unexamined life is not worth living. That basically means that if you are a thinking human being, then your purpose is to contemplate about the rightness or wrongness of the things that are happening in your life, of your behavior, of your choices, of your decisions, of your actions. We have to contemplate these things because that's what basically makes us human beings. That's what makes us human beings. And this is the good life for Socrates. And so, pursuing the life of contemplation, pursuing the life of philosophy, is what constitutes the good life. Of course, Plato was so heavily influenced by these ideas from his teacher. Okay, let's talk about Plato. It's really very difficult to distinguish the ideas that are purely attributable to Plato or purely attributable to Socrates, because Socrates never wrote anything. We only came to know about his ideas due to Plato's writings. Another thing, I almost forgot. Another thing that is very important for Plato is the method of Socrates of studying, which is basically the method of question and answer, refutations. Okay? Socrates was well known for employing this kind of learning method that is going to ask someone about certain things, about preconceptions and concepts, about various types of things, and then Socrates would try to refute using logic, using common sense, and then the other person would try to rebut, and then it goes on. Okay, so the method of question and answer, later on it will be called as the Socratic method. All throughout the Platonic dialogues, it was all written that way. Now, Plato believed that there is an ideal society. And this ideal society for Plato is a society where there is virtue. Because for Plato, human life will not be able to flourish within the society if there are no virtues. And so, there's these 4 cardinal virtues that are very crucial to understand Platonic political theorizing. What are these virtues? Wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. For Plato, these virtues must be present within the political community. When these virtues are present, the life of the people within this political community will be rightly ordered. And when the life of people living in this political community are rightly ordered, their life will flourish. They will live a good life. um, so, Plato in the Republic basically tried to conceptualize an ideal state. An ideal state where these four cardinal virtues reign supreme. The virtues of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice reigns all over the Republic. This is the ideal state that Plato is trying to conceptualize. For Plato, if we want to have a good life, we must live in this ideal state. All states must conform to the ideals of the Republic. But before he went through it, we can clearly deduce the primary importance of justice. Because for Plato, justice is the ultimate goal of any state. Without justice, the state will not flourish. Not just it will not flourish, but it would crumble down. It's not an ideal state. In order for it to be ideal, there must be justice. Now, but in order for us to understand what justice is, Plato would like to study the notions of the three parts of the soul. The three parts of the soul. For Plato, the soul, or let's say the psyche, human character, that's the psyche, okay, our character, the way we think, our reason, okay, is big. The soul, it's not the soul like a ghost, okay. The soul is our psyche, our make up as a human being, our character, so to speak. And by the way, what Plato wants is basically to enhance character, to make the human character better. Now, for the three parts of the soul, of course, you have the lowest, which is basically called the appetitive part of the soul. Meaning to say, for all human beings, there is a part in us that just simply wants to consume many things like food, beverages, pleasure, right? That's what he called the appetitive part of the soul. And then Plato would move on and say that there's another part of the soul which basically constitutes the passion, right? The driving force, the passion in the soul is basically what constitutes our desires. And of course, the last one is reason, which is basically what is supposed to govern the other parts of the soul, appetitive and passion. For Plato, you will be a good person, you will live a good life if there is harmony within the soul, if there is harmony of the three parts of the soul. Once there is harmony, then there will be justice in the soul. So how would that happen? Harmony within the soul of a person can only happen if reason is in full control of the passions, the fiery passions, and the appetites of a person. Because appetites are good. I mean, if you're hungry, you will feel the desire to eat, and that's good. If you don't have that, you're gonna die. Even the desire to procreate is actually good, because if you don't have it, then we cannot procreate, and so on, right? However, if the appetites will not be under the control of reason, then these appetites will become monsters. It will destroy our lives. The same thing with the fiery passions that we have, right? We may have passion for learning, we may have passion to do something, right? So, if these passions will not be under the control of reason, then these passions, no matter how good they are, they would also become monsters. They will destroy our lives. And so, in order for the soul to have a harmony, the three parts of the soul must be harmonized. The reason must be the one to dictate. Now, the three parts of the soul, there's also a corresponding virtue on the three parts of the soul. When it comes to appetite, it's temperance. Temperance as a virtue means the ability to control. You control your appetite. Even if you feel like you're doing it, you can control it. Your passions, of course, was very important. There is the virtue of courage, right? And reason is the virtue of wisdom. And so you can say that it is wisdom that subdues or controls courage and even temperance. Because once reason is controlling the other parts of the soul, there will be harmony in the soul. There will be temperance in the soul. And there will be justice in the soul. So justice in the soul can be achieved when there is harmony in the soul. And there is harmony in the soul once reason is in full control of both the fiery passions in the soul and the appetites in the soul. Now, Plato would extend that into what is happening in the society. What's happening in the society, in the political community, is basically the same thing that is happening within the human soul. If there is a need to harmonize the three parts of the soul, then there is also a need to harmonize the three parts, or shall I say, the three classes of the people living within the political community. These three classes of the people living in the political community are, of course, number one, the producers. The producers. Basically, they're the ones, who produces everything that the society needs. The farmers, the vendors in the market, the fishermen, the craftsmen, etc. They are the producers. Basically, they basically constitute, a huge part of the political community of the republic. And then there's this other part called the auxiliaries. The auxiliaries are akin to that of soldiers. They defend the state. And of course, there are the rulers. These rulers are called philosopher kings by Plato. Now, just like in the soul, that the three parts of the soul, would correspond to virtues. The three classes would also correspond to virtues. Right? The rulers, they would correspond to wisdom. Without wisdom, they cannot rule. Auxiliaries, they must have courage. And producers, they must have temperance. But then again, temperance is a kind of virtue that is not that should not be solely seen from the producers. Temperance is a kind of virtue that should be embodied by everyone within the republic. Because once again, temperance is the ability to control appetites and passions. Just like in the three parts of the soul, in order for harmony within the soul to take place, then there must also be harmony among the three classes of the people within the republic. And there can only be harmony once there is temperance. Because when there is temperance, you can control your passion, you can control your courage, you can control your aggressiveness, you can control, yourself, your pleasure desiring motivations, you can control them. And it is the responsibility of the ruler class to rule the entirety of the republic, because they're the ones endowed with the capability to think. So you see here the primacy of the thinking faculty. You see that in the soul, it is reason that has to govern the other parts of the soul. Here in the republic, it's also the rulers who represent reason and wisdom who should govern both the auxiliaries and the producers. Without these so-called rulers governing, then there will not be harmony in the soul. There will be no harmony in the republic. When there is no harmony, then there will be chaos. Later on, it will be destroyed. It will destroy itself. Now, so we see now again the virtues of wisdom, courage, and temperance. And just like in the soul, when there's this presence of wisdom, courage, and temperance, it triggers the presence of this ultimate virtue called justice. When justice is achieved in the republic, it means that the people in the republic are willing to accept their roles in the republic. That's very important in Platonic political theory, because these people must accept that they are producers. If you are a producer, you cannot be an auxiliary, and certainly you cannot be a ruler. If you are an auxiliary, you can also not be a ruler. There are only very few people who are trained, educated, and qualified and has the ability to rule. And these are the rulers. And you have to accept that. If you're a producer, you have to accept the fact that you are a producer. If you accept that fact, then you will live a good life. You will benefit the society. If you are an auxiliary, accept the fact that you're a soldier. Embrace your role. If you are a ruler, embrace the fact that that is your role. You are a ruler. Now, when these people, these classes in the society, accepts who they are, accepts their capability, accepts their role within the republic, then justice will emerge. There will be harmony in the political community. Just try to think of it this way. That if people would force themselves to do things that they are not capable of, that's gonna be injustice. If producers who are not qualified to rule will try to force the issue of them ruling, then there will be injustice. Okay? And so Plato wants everyone in the society to accept their role. Unless they accept their role, there will be no justice in the society. And once there is no justice, there is no harmony, there will be chaos, and we cannot live good lives. So, essentially, justice for Plato means giving what is due. So, if what is due to you is for you to be a producer, then be a producer. If what is due to you is to be a ruler, then you have to be a ruler, even if you want to be a producer. You know what? As a matter of fact, the life of a producer is, in a way, the life that would give you a lot of pleasure. Being a producer means that, you can enjoy life, you can have a lot of money, etc. You can enjoy the pleasures of life. Rulers cannot do that, because there's a strict regimen that Plato would want rulers to follow, right? So there's this great responsibility and sacrifice that Plato would ask the rulers to do. So it's a great sacrifice. As a matter of fact, rulers actually, they do not want to rule, but they don't have a choice. It is their responsibility, and they have to accept that. Otherwise, the entire political community will be in chaos. Now, when will all these things happen? Of course, this is something that is very ideal. So when will these things happen? For Plato, this will happen when either kings become philosophers or philosophers become kings. Because you see, the rulers for Plato are the philosophers. Why is that? Because philosophers are the ones seeking the truth. They want to seek knowledge, or they are seeking knowledge. They don't really care much about the pleasures of the body, but they just want to know what is right. They want to know what's the true, the good, and the beautiful. They are obsessed with finding the right things in life. They're obsessed in finding knowledge and truth in life. And for Plato, only this type of people are capable to rule. There's this allegory of the cave for Plato, for you to understand the notion of what a philosopher is. So there's this cave. Imagine that there's this person, and all his life is inside the cave. And the only thing that person sees are shadows, because in the cave there's a fire. And so when there's fire, there are shadows that are cast. And so for this person who lived his entire life in the cave, he only sees shadows. Shadows. For him, the shadows that he sees inside the cave is the reality, is the truth. But this person happened to be able to free himself from the chains in the cave and went out of the cave. When he went out of the cave, he saw the light. At first, it hurt his eyes, but later on, his eyes adjusted and he saw the things out there outside of the cave. And then he realized that what he saw in the cave are just mere shadows. They are not real. And so, this person who went out of the cave and saw the light, saw the reality of things outside of the cave, decided to return to the cave because he also wanted the other people who are chained inside of the cave to know the truth, to know the reality out there. This person wants everyone to follow him so that they could see the light outside of the cave, the reality of things outside of the cave. They want them to realize that what they see are just mere shadows, not real. Now, of course, the people inside of the cave will not believe. They will not believe that there is a reality out there, that there's light out there, because they're so accustomed to seeing shadows in the darkness of the cave. They would hate that guy who wanted to free them. They would hurt him. They would even kill him. But that guy who went outside of the cave, who saw the light, who experienced a kind of epiphany, who wanted other people to also see the light, that is a philosopher. And for Plato, rulers have to be philosophers. He called them philosopher kings. Only philosopher kings can lead. Only philosopher kings have the ability to lead, to govern, to manage the affairs of the state, so that all in the state would fall in line. That means everyone would do their respective roles. Now, if you would think that the position of a ruler or a philosopher king is akin to the position of government officials right now, you are mistaken. The life of a philosopher king is a life of strictness, a very strict life. There's very little pleasure. As a matter of fact, a philosopher king would give up the pleasures of life. Because what is really important for the philosopher king is to serve the republic. He's going to give up the entirety of his being to serve. He's gonna give up property. He's gonna give up his life ambitions. He's gonna give up, pleasures in life. He's gonna give up all of those things so that he can serve the people. He can serve the republic, so that there will be justice in the republic. And once there is justice, the life of the people within the republic will flourish. That's what Plato wants. The good life for everyone.